Welcome back. You are watching Kivumbi 2022. Thank you for staying with us, being present since 6 p.m. We are on our last lap and we want to take a look at the data, as I promised. Where are we? What are the numbers looking like? And what journey has been there for the two-thirds gender principle? What have been some of the issues that have marked the hallmark of this two-thirds gender principle journey to its realization? And of course, why then has the legislative and the judicial arm of government been at loggerheads, specifically because of this particular piece of legislation? So then let's pick it up from women who have had a stab at presidency from independent time. But of course, remember earlier I made a mistake there. In 2002, 10 women were elected. We missed one on our Super Bowl, but just to correct that, 10 women were elected in 2002, and then the following year we saw about 16 women elected. So then about 4 women have taken a stab at the presidency since 1963. The very first woman to announce and actually go ahead and vie for the presidency was Charity Ngilu, who did this in 1997. This was just 5 years after she was elected for the first time as a member of parliament in Kitui. In that particular year, Charity Ngilu managed 469,807 votes, which translated to 7.71% of the vote. But of course, President Moi carried the day in this particular election. Wangari Maathai was also part of the 1997 election, which she vied for. She was first elected in 2003. Many of us know her as the first African woman to receive the Nobel laureate, but her name was among those who vied for the presidency in 97, together with Charity Ngilu, where she garnered 4,133 votes, translating to 0.07%. Then in 2007, beg your pardon, quite a mistake here. In 2007, we'd see Nazlin Omar Fazaldin vie for the presidency, garnering 8,624 votes, which is 0.09% of the vote. This particular election, so it is when Kenya first experienced a post-election violence after President Mwai Kibaki was announced winner with the then ECK chairperson Samuel Kivuitu. Then Martha Karua, again a mistake here, vied in 2013 and garnered 43,881 votes, translating to 0.36%. Let's take note of these numbers because they will form the basis of our conversation with our panelists shortly here on Kivumbi 2022. But then, let's take a look at what the journey has been like. The two-thirds gender role that has been inside Parliament for 11 years, but still remains a mirage with just about a year to the 2022 general election. In 2012, the then Attorney General Githu Muigai approached the Supreme Court seeking an advisory on how best to implement the two-thirds gender principle that came into force with the 2010 promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. The Supreme Court then gave Parliament until August 27th, 2015, a deadline to come up with a piece of legislation that will help in the implementation of the two-thirds gender rule. This did not happen, and in March 2017, we'd see then the High Court found Parliament failed to enact legislation that would help come up or implement the two-thirds gender principle. This is the very basis of the many court cases that have been in place as a result of the lack of implementation or lack of legislation to support the implementation of the two-thirds gender principle. Then between 2019 and July 2020, then Chief Justice David Maraga received 2 petitions urging him to advise the President to dissolve Parliament. He did crack that whip on September 21st when he wrote to the President recommending for the dissolution of Parliament for continued violation of the two-thirds gender rule. I want us to quickly Just take a look at the bills that have been taken to Parliament, and I'm glad we have the former Majority Leader Aden Duale, because he's responsible for 2 bills that touch on this, and he'll be giving us more details on this and just why we have failed to pass this piece of legislation. Is it how we are crafting these bills? Is it lack of political goodwill? What is the missing link? What do we seem to be getting wrong? So then in 2011, Mutula Kilonzo, there was a bill by Mutula Kilonzo then seeking to provide for a post-election nomination number of women to meet the threshold so that women are nominated after we have seen the deficit number required or stipulated in the Constitution. The bill lapsed without being debated. Then came the Duale 1 bill. I think that was around 2015, and he sought to amend Articles 97 and 98 that specify the number or the fixed membership in both the National Assembly and the Senate. He then sought to increase the number of special seats, and this number of special seats would be determined after the declaration of the results. By doing this, then we would eliminate all pre-existing nominated seats, including those for youth and persons living with disabilities, as well as limit the number of terms a person nominated to the special seat could serve to a maximum of 2. The bill was tabled at the National Assembly and was not passed despite attempts at the vote. Then the Sijan bill sought to revive that particular Duale 1 bill. It was unsuccessful at the Senate. There was then the Chepkonga bill, which is the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2015, that sought to defer the implementation of the 2/3 gender principle by proposing to amend Article 81B of the Constitution by inserting the word progressive implementation. So then that this implementation is not done once, but we give it some time for progressive implementation, arguing that it would be hard for this to be done in one sitting. And he emphasized more on election of women through capacity building, civic education, facilitation, and participation in political party affairs. We'd really love to hear what our panelists have to say about that. Then came the Duale Bill 2, again, the Constitution Amendment Bill number 6 of 2015, and that was introduced in the National Assembly in February 2018. That really is pretty much the same as the Duale 1 bill, borrowed heavily from the Duale 1 bill and sought fixed membership of the National Assembly and the Senate, again amending Articles 97 and 98. Finally, the big issue now is the issue of cost, financing of campaigns and this election by women candidates. Just how much have women spent in the past? An average, statistics show that women outspent men in all elective posts except the Senate. An average of 23.6 million shillings was used in running for the National Assembly seats, and male candidates spent 17 million shillings. You can see that disparity, and we'll be talking about it shortly. Also, women candidates spent more than double the amount of their male counterparts spent, and especially in 17 MCA seats, spending an average of 6.4 million shillings compared to their counterparts who spent 2.9 million shillings. Why is it more expensive for women to vie in this country? We'll be seeking those answers shortly. Finally, the women rep seat contestants spent 13.6 million shillings in primaries and 9.2 million shillings. The candidates who won the women rep seat spent an average of 32.2 million shillings, while those who lost spent an average of 13.4 million shillings. Ridiculous amounts, if I could call it that, but we just want to understand, okay, why is it that expensive for women to vie in our elections, from the National Assembly to the MCA seats and to the women rep seats? What are we not getting wrong, and why are women outspending compared to their male counterparts? We'll be seeking those answers shortly, but first we sought the views of some key figures in various parts of the country, and we spoke to Helen Apio from Kisumu. She's a political commentator about this issue and what seems to be derailing women when it comes to politics and elective seats in this country. Let's take a look at what she said.
As an introduction, I'll say politics is generally a messy affair, and women, we are born to be people. who do not like messes. Women are generally planners. So when you want to get, let me use an example of a pig. People say politics is dirty. I don't believe politics is dirty. I actually believe politics is messy. Why do I say so? You find that women compartmentalize things. Women are planners. So generally, what is affecting us now, or what is affecting me? Let me use myself as a case example. Number one is the party politics. You find that in any process or stage in life, there is something called induction. You will find that we are on our own. We have a party that we should run on. But the predecessors, the people who've gone before us, should hold our hands as new aspirants who want to get in this race, because there is a lot of violence in the party politics. There is a lot of tarnishing on names, both on social media or on the ground. You find that a woman is a very delicate person. So when you throw her out politically, in a party that she does not understand the journey, because in Kenya it is about which party are you using? Which vehicle are you using to take you on this journey? So basically, when you get into a party that's not women-friendly, that does not give women room and chances to do things the way they should do, women shy away. So you really have to be a tough woman to actually say, I'm going to go for this, no matter what. We don't have fair competition. Men always think, you know, politics has always been a men's club for a very long time. So men always think that a woman deserves a nomination slot. So they will tell you, why don't you run with us, but let the man go for the seat, and then we nominate you. Why do you think women are people of a lesser beings or children of a less God? So that is also another issue that's affecting women into getting into active politics.
Helen Appiah, the political commentator in Kisumu, weighing in on our topic of conversation this evening. A good evening to you, in case you're just joining us tonight on Kivumbi 2022 from as early as 6 p.m. with our colleagues in our Swahili department. We have been conversing the subject of gender disparity in elective positions and representation in this country. And to continue that conversation, earlier on, we had with us Anne Ireri, who is the FIDA Executive Director. Also with us is Priscilla Nyokabi. She's a commissioner with the Gender and Equality Commission. I beg your pardon. We also have Eden Duale, who's the Garissa Township Member of Parliament and the former leader of majority in the National Assembly. And Akiso, of course, is with us for this last leg of the show. We'd also love to hear from you. We are at Akisa Wandera, at Sophia Wanuna, at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use this evening is Kivumbi 2022. And a roundtable today just purely of ladies, a pleasant one. I guess sometimes we get quite something, isn't it? We get bashed for manners, and you know, so it's refreshing that as we have this conversation, of course we have Honorable Duale as well with us, to have you, and thank you for staying on this evening. Ireri, I'll begin with you, I think, on this second leg, just looking at the figures. Akisa was just presenting, and especially the question of cost. I was surprised initially when I saw the data, because I figured, you know, in terms of the financial muscle, that the women would themselves just be struggling. But to see that they are outspending men, does that then for you explain why this really has become a rough and tough terrain for women?
Absolutely, Sophia. I think for us, and as I mentioned at FIDA Kenya, we have been working with women on this journey. In 2017, we carried out a research together with NDI, and part of what we saw is in terms of fielding women, for example, at ward level, you actually have very many women in each ward who present themselves for elections. Why are they outspending the men? Because as a woman, you're having to prove yourself twice as much as a man. So what happens is, even if you don't have the financial muscle, you have to run around and see who's supportive, who's going to bank on your vision, on your manifesto. At times we've had women who've had to sell a lot of even their personal property. So what now we need to look at is, how do we make women access better credit, access it at a cost that's not punitive, and have more options for women in terms of financing elections. So what we are seeing is that, for instance, when you look at the women representative seat or the county member of assembly, she has to traverse the entire wards and the sub-counties within a county. That is expensive, bearing in mind she has to invest on issues such as security twice as much as a man. And so what we are looking at is, if we alleviate the risk factors that women candidates face, then we might bring the cost down, including at party primaries, where they also have to navigate a number of hurdles to even get that nomination. So what we are looking at, and that's why we, as FIDA and other partners, we've even launched the Voter Data Initiative, is to bring this conversation to fore. And we've had women aspirants coming out across the country declaring their interest. How then do we leverage on issues such as cost? If you look at the figures that we are mentioning, Sophia, I mean, they make anyone shudder. If you think of a first-timer having to spend even more than 10 million, who has that kind of money? And must Kenyan elections be that expensive? That is what we need to question.
An interesting conversation that comes at a time when there was a whole debate when Chebukati, gave out the spending cap on all the seats from presidency down to MCAs. And it would seem normal to a lot of people, but all of us were asking ourselves, who has that kind of money? And that women are now outspending men in these elections. I mean, then what do we expect in 2022? Because we are saying that perhaps things will be different in 2022, but if they have to spend this much, what do they need to put in place or to do to bridge this without spending that much?
For us, I think we start, and we keep reiterating this with the political parties, because if the political parties as themselves end up being friendly to women, one, with the nomination process, by assuring women who are putting forward a very well thought out, crafted campaign strategy, that they'll not be overlooked by male counterparts simply because they're women. And then secondly, as I've mentioned, looking at securing the space for women, because as a woman, you'll have to think of who's your security. You have to work with the security everywhere. You have to have vehicles that will keep you secure. You have to think beforehand as a woman, because your risk is higher than a man. Then we'll have women bringing the cost down. And the thing about conditioning is this, that when you listen to the IBC chairperson, what he put is a cap. But you see, already our minds have been conditioned that you have to spend that much. Look at the presidential campaign. You're talking of 5 billion Kenyan shillings that are going to be spent, within the next 11 months. And so as Kenyans, I think the conversation has to start with us, not just for the women, but for any person vying for elective office in this country. Why do we have to spend that much? And are there ways of bringing that cost down? And if, as a presidential candidate, I spend 5 billion, what are the implications on the country once I get into office?
Honorable Duale, let me bring you in. I hope you managed to see our presentation and the figures we had from WFD. Women outspent men in all elective posts except Senate. I mean, elections in Kenya in the first place, as Madam Ireri was mentioning, are very expensive. You know, astronomical figures that you see. So that now, with so many cards stacked against women, isn't this just going to further entrench the problem we are trying to break down this evening, that the disparity in terms of gender will continue?
Thank you, Wanuna. But before I even go to the issue of the campaign resources, let me just make two things very clear. Number one, that my colleague Honorable Nyokabi said. One, that IBC chair cannot force political parties in presenting their nomination list as we approach the 2022 general election to be two-thirds gender compliant. And I say this, everything we do must be based in law. The Election Act of 2011 has no single provision asking IEBC to implement that decision. 2, the Constitution doesn't provide. 3, Article 27, Article 81, and Article 100 have not been implemented. The only thing available is an advisory opinion that the court gave in a petition number 19 of 2017 between IEBC and Katiba Institute, where the court said and urges IEBC to define or do an administrative mechanism compelling parties to present that. So even tomorrow, if we have political parties doing nominations, there is no law that compels them. That's number 1. And number 2, and more fundamentally, I really want to ask Honorable Nyokabi and Honorable Governor of Kirinyaga and Charity Ngilu. I mean, these group of women were at the heartbeat of the BBI, and their leaders who are the president and the former prime minister. You know, the speed, the energy, the resources they used, the intimidation they used in passing the BBI in the House, where the 2/3 threshold was passed. Why can't they bring the bill tomorrow, use the same resources, the same intimidation to pass it? I mean, so what the leaders were saying all that time when I had the Duale bill, the president was just making a pronouncement, the former prime minister makes a pronouncement, Honorable William Ruto makes a pronouncement, Kalonzo Musyoka, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka makes a pronouncement. Why can't you ask Honorable Nyokabi? She was one of the people in the middle of BBI. Why can't you use the unconstitutional, even for me to say? So people are not very sincere and not very honest. Now coming back to the matter you have raised on capital. This is about the individual, whether it is men or women. Everybody who wants to vie for any seat in this country must have a plan, must have the resources, and then going forward, in the middle of the campaign, you will get friends, you will get the party support. All this must come from the individual. And you know this story of saying Kenyans don't elect women. The most conservative communities are the pastoralists. They've elected Honorable Sophia for a member of parliament in Ijara. They've elected Honorable Esuda from Samburu. They've elected Fatuma Dulo in Isiolo. Right. So it is possible. And I really want to urge the women of Kenya that they must, as you said, this 2/3 gender principle. Honorable, the late Mutula Kilonzo tried in the 10th parliament. I was sitting there. Honorable Mother Karua, as the Minister for Justice, tried. I tried during my time. And the other thing I also want to make very clear is that if this parliament, the 12th parliament, does not implement that constitutional provision, you cannot punish the 13th parliament. This matter is for that current parliament.
Okay.
So that the 13th parliament will have an obligation to start afresh. Yes.
All right, and as we bring it to Honorable Nyokabi, you've alluded to quite a number of the points there. It will be interesting on one hand because we had the chair of IEBC some weeks ago here on Kivumbi, and he was categorical that as far as the political parties and accepting those party lists, if they do not meet that 2/3 gender rule, they would not be accepting them. I would hope that you would be one encouraging that kind of a stance as opposed to saying he has no basis in law, because then you want the same to be implemented. But let's hear from Honorable Nyokabi. We'll be coming back to you, sir. Your thoughts on what you're hearing Honorable Duale say tonight?
Yes, I think you're right on that. Yeah, Honorable Duale has supported women in a big way before. I mean, for the bills to be named after him, Duale 1 and Duale 2. And I now think that because he's in a new formation, the UDA, we've even been looking to him for a solution, although the BBI did not work. And so we are hoping that indeed the party that he belongs to is going to give us a party candidates list that is compliant. Because this excuse about the law is just that. If IEBC is guided by Article 81, which is in mandatory terms, that the electoral outcome shall provide an outcome that is two-thirds compliant, let's not run away with the law. But I think that since they're in Parliament, and I told you earlier that the conversation is going on, there might be merit, and he knows this, that the statute law amendments can be done, and I think there might be some minimum amendments ahead of the elections. And so these are some of the matters that can be contained. Because, you know, the conversation we had in FIDA was that not just a two-thirds party candidates list, because then those areas might not be strongholds. If we even want to be in the strongholds, it has to be a two-thirds party candidates list county-based. And really we must have this conversation, because the answer is that men and women are important to come to leadership for the answers that our country needs. And so for me, a leader like majority leader must lead Parliament, but also his own side of politics. He has good questions around the BBI. And let me tell you, one of the people who's completely frustrated by the lack of progress on BBI is actually myself. We had the best package in BBI. We had a 50-50 Senate, and we had full top-up in the National Assembly in the BBI. And we even had this compelling of IEBC for the party candidates list in the BBI. And we had punishment for political parties that do not accept the two-thirds bill. I haven't quite given up. I know the stars are not aligning properly and it doesn't look too good, but me, I don't give up easily on these two-thirds. So I'm one of those people, even on my side of divide, pushing that let's go to the let's go to the Supreme Court, let's appeal these things. Because on one hand, the Chief Justice Maraga says that the Parliament is unconstitutional if it does not give two-thirds, and it did not give two-thirds. You bring a solution, and then another court finds the solution you know, unconstitutional. So we have to go back, I think, to the same courts and say, why don't you then give more binding decisions, like the Katiba Institute decision? Then those decisions are going to have to be more binding for the election that we're going into. But then, you know, this is a societal conversation. So it's not even the kind of conversation that you can blame X or Y that we're not making progress. The reason why we went to BBI ourselves was we were now building bridges, community bridges and bridges across communities in Kenya. One of the constituencies for which we needed a bridge was gender, and we were able to show that the gender bridge is also important. And so this conversation of the society and of the community is one that we must have, so that this nomination, as we keep saying, is a default. He has a good point around Governor Ngilu, Governor Waigoro being elected, Martha Karua being elected. But those numbers are far too few to meet what we require of the Constitution. So the entire society has to agree to elect women who are strong and women who can perform, so that leadership is not a gender issue. Leadership should be equality, that this is the quality of leadership we want. If it comes to parties, there are programs that parties can have that then encourage more women to come out to leadership. Like now, we have no choice. The parties must go out and encourage women, young women, old women, women with disability, to come out and vie on their tickets and to come out and get elected. Parties must spend money on that process. The only one I don't want us to discourage women around is the cost of running. I was elected at 34. I honestly did not break a bank to be elected, and I want to thank the people of Nyeri. I did not.
What was different?
I did not bribe people.
What was different?
I had an agenda. I wanted to do this for women. I was always going to run on a women's agenda, and that is why, and you know, Majority Leader was very helpful to us with the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. I went to school on chama money. My mother was a member of a chama. And kwetu kuna Mama Shiro. We were always going to Mama Shiro's home to pick the chama money to go to school. And so for me, when I came onto Parliament, it was very, very important to find a fund that supports women economic empowerment and those chamas that they are funding. When I went and people were asking me, wapi leso? I said, leso ni za roho, you know, because I don't have money for lesos. And you know, we are not going to steal, we are not going to be corrupt to be elected. If you go to Nyeri now, and you show the people of Nyeri where you will find money for water, and money for health, like NHIF now, bill is on discussion, and you have ideas about how we should run hospitals. Like I personally think that money for hospitals should be sent to hospitals. Given the level of corruption in our country, I don't even know why the money for hospitals, I don't know where, all over the place. Why can't money for hospital go to the hospital, then we have dawa? If you're coming to Parliament to pass that law, let me tell you, you need no money. And our people understand. So let us not scare women. If you have an agenda, go package yourself well. Mama, I don't have money. When I went to campaigns myself, I used to have a small car, and they would tell me, that this car is like for a taxi, you know, it was like a taxi car, it was a small Corolla. A friend of mine who's an artist, a cartoonist, drew a cartoon that we are not electing a car, we are electing an individual. The people who had big cars, how to downgrade their cars, because now it looked like the small car is really, you know, it's not a good idea. And let me tell you, it is not a good idea to vote people with money. Because when you vote people with money, sometimes they don't understand the pain of some of these processes. So what was Yogope? And let us speak to our people, young people, tokezea, kuwa na agenda. Na si agenda ya corruption, kuwa tu na agenda mzuri, at least you have some little money to move, because then you have to move to voters. But you don't need to bribe voters. Majority of voters, you don't have to bribe them. And let us not put these seats for sale. The seats are not for sale. These seats are for leadership, answers, and solutions to our problems.
Maybe, Ray, because it's an important question that I've seen here, and one of our viewers asks, so then what happens when we go to the 2022 polls, the 13th Parliament, but we still don't have clear structures on how to implement two-thirds? What will happen then?
I think
and they have not achieved it, of course.
Yes, I think it will be a very sad day for Kenyan, and especially Kenyan women, because as Honorable Nyokabi has said, and Honorable Duale said, it's not an issue for women. This is a Kenyan issue. We have got to go back to the basics. Why are we pushing for more women in parliament, more women in leadership? We start from the basics that women are 52% of this country, but that's not the issue. If you look at issues that affect women, Article 43, issues to do with resources, issues to do with socio-economic rights, issues to do with COVID. Right now, who are the primary caregivers in the homes? It's women in this country. And so we must have decisions at the table made by women as well. And I think for us, it will really be a sad thing, but we are optimistic at the same time. Ask me why. I think we sit at a time where Kenya has produced the first female Chief Justice. So we need to take stock of this success. We've listened to stories such as Honorable Nyokabi's story. She did not have to bribe or break a bank. So I think for us, and that's the urging we have for Kenyans, let's focus on the positive, where we've had remarkable women, and they're there, who have produced success.
Yes.
We can do that. But going back to your question, I think Kenyans need to understand that the question we are facing also has to do with impunity, because this is a court decision that has been pronounced in terms of us ensuring a constitutional, a parliament that's constituted within the law. And today we might think the question is just about women. Tomorrow it will be something very pertinent, exactly, or even something to do with a basic fundamental right. So it's really about our adherence to what the courts produce in terms of orders. It's about our commitment to the Constitution and the full implementation of the Constitution as is. So I think for Kenyans, let's look at it that it will be a sad day, but today it will be about women. Tomorrow it will be about your right to something else as a Kenyan, as a man. And so we must create a culture where we are bound by the laws that we have subscribed to, and including those that come from the courts.
Honorable Duale, I want to take you back to something you said a little bit earlier about how, looking at the energy we saw around BBI, through Parliament, through the county assemblies, that you wish the same would apply on the two-thirds gender rule. And now that you are part of that government, but perhaps now you have more latitude to fungua roho, perhaps tell us what went wrong. Wasn't there political will, truly? Because this went south. You were there. You are with the powers that be and continue to be. So what really, if you were to give Kenyans insights into behind-the-scenes happenings, when you are the leader? Yeah, exactly.
First, you'll get a lot of the insights of when I was the leader of majority, 7.5 years, when the book I'm now writing, my memo, comes out next year. But let me now tell you what happened. I mean, during the two-third gender bill, the political will was very cosmetic. I mean, no political party, including my own party, Jubilee, called and made a serious commitment and investment and convinced its rank and file on the passage. I mean, Nyokabi was with me in that house. And again, even on the part of the women members of parliament, including Nyokabi, on the days when we were doing the two-third, looking for the two-third threshold, I remember one time half of the women members of parliament were in New York. They were out of the house. And members of the male counterparts were asking, what's going on here? So there was no serious individual political party at the highest level commitment. Secondly, and you saw, you saw BBI. BBI was a different ball game. But let me say this. The number of women members of parliament and leadership was growing progressively in this country. If you look at the numbers since 2008. And if you look at other jurisdictions like the US House of Representatives, they are at one of their best numbers now, at 27%. So there's no serious constitutional crisis. You know, to say that this must happen before 2022. The people of Kenya, the way Honorable Nyokabi said, people must sell ideas. The Kenyan voters, I am sure even there are many, many of us, the male members of parliament, who came from very humble background, and we became members of parliament.
But
so it's not about the resources. So
you said there is no crisis. However, these numbers, as you say, are growing progressively. From the data we showed, the best performing year in as far as the representation of women was in 2007 when we were at 9.8. We've since dipped. As of 2017, it's 7.9. 2013 was 5.5. It's because there perhaps is no structure. Shouldn't we be seeing the likes of yourself, the deputy president, saying maybe next year he'll have a female running mate, so that there's more increase of this goodwill that clearly is very much needed at the very highest levels?
No. You know, the question of a running mate cannot, there are many factors to be considered for one to choose a running mate. There are a number of factors. And you need to look at, and the numbers must add up. It must bring you a winning formula to form government. You will not just pick a woman just because you want to comply with the 2/3 gender principle. If I was a presidential candidate, if I can get a woman and the numbers will add and the formula will make me win, so be it. So don't make this very conventional. The people of Kenya slowly, even the most conservative communities I gave you earlier, are electing women. But tell me, there are only 4 countries in the world, led by Rwanda, that have achieved 50%. The countries that have achieved 30% are not more than 40 in the world. In the most democratic parliament in the world, they have not even achieved, like the US. I think the House of Commons has done better in the 2019 election. So let us not make this matter as life and death for the political landscape in our country. And finally, let me tell you, let me now say this last. I had Governor Waiguru saying that herself, Governor Ngilu, and many others are role models that will make many women to be elected. I can tell you without fear of contradiction, it's public knowledge, the history of Anne Waiguru in the national government in terms of accountability, the history of Charity Ngilu in her accountability.
Well, in fairness,
women leaders,
Honorable Duale, they're not here to defend themselves. In fairness, they're not here to defend themselves. So
no, I'm saying, but they cannot. But they also cannot say that they are role models for the upcoming young women leaders. That is hypocrisy.
All right, fair point.
All right, and I like that you went back to the numbers that we are seeing globally when it comes to, who's met the threshold. We are talking about Rwanda leading, and Rwanda is doing tremendously well. So then what is Rwanda doing differently, and what stops Kenya from getting there, Honorable Duale?
Number one, and let me make it very clear, the democratic credentials and history is different from Kenya and Uganda, Rwanda, in terms of numbers, in terms of size. Secondly, Rwanda is using party list, that this constituency X is for a female candidate, constituency Y is for male candidates. That cannot be implemented in our political scenario. The Constitution allows every Kenyan, there's universal suffrage in terms of voting. Today, the people of Garissa Township or Kiambaa constituency, IBC or anybody else cannot force, even the parties cannot force that you must elect a woman, constituency X a woman, constituency Y a woman. That scenario is not applicable in our Kenyan scenario. So I think all that we need to do is create a conducive environment where women leaders, in terms of civic education, in terms of capacity building, in terms of political parties, giving them more space at the decision table. In fact, women leaders must ask themselves, why are they not highly represented at the top leadership of political parties? This should be a discussion. I am one person who believes women leaders can do better in the socio-economic development of our country.
Okay.
But again, we must do everything within the context and the framework of the Constitution and the laws.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thank you. And I know, Honorable Nyokabi, you have a lot to say on that. But let me just speak on something that Honorable Duale has talked about, that we're not in a crisis. This is something that can happen progressively. We can't just wake up one morning and boom, we have implemented this. This was stipulated in the Chepkonga bill, and he wanted us to insert progressive implementation in Article 81B of the Constitution, so that then we take time for capacity building, for civic education, facilitation. Of course, then this would usurp the Supreme Court advisory with a deadline of implementation. But then is this something we need to think about, that perhaps let's take time with this? Let's capacity build, let's put civic education, let's take time to put proper structures. What do you think about that Chepkonga bill? And is it something
I didn't even agree.
Consider?
I didn't agree to it then. I don't agree to it now. I didn't agree then. In fact, I even said there's a male JLAC and the JLAC of Kenya. So I said that's the male JLAC that brought that bill. It wasn't even agreed among the stakeholders. You remember that my commission, the NGC, had been tasked by the Attorney General to come up with a task force to look at the different options. And the reason why the top-up option was adopted is because it is already in the Constitution in Article 177. So even then, that is why the bill had to be withdrawn. You know that we didn't even vote on that bill. So that bill didn't go anywhere. Chepkonga himself, I think, quickly realized that that particular bill was not popular. And you know, for me, having just been in the BBI process, we have a certain amount of political will. And he says it correctly, it is not enough political will. But we do indeed have a certain amount of political will. You will remember that it is the Duale bill that moved and not the Chepkonga bill. So, wachana na, you know, the bad history, wachana na bad history. Let's deal with the good history of where we are trying to implement.
Is still referring to it, progressive.
No, we are women. We are many. It was a 2015 bill. We are now in 2021. We are many years past that Chepkonga bill, and it was misguided. It was misadvised. We said it at the time. There were even cartoons. You know, he really suffered for it himself.
And you're saying it now.
And we were even threatening to go to his constituency. But even in this BBI, some men came with the idea of deleting the 2/3. And so, for me now, we are not there. We are at the point of implementing. We are not debating 2/3. We are not debating whether it is good or bad. What we are debating are the formulas, the strategies, what we're going to do to implement it. So even don't bring that bill again. You don't
want to hear about it.
But Sasa, where we are at now, especially because these attempts had been done, in 2021 we had fairly good attempts. What has happened is that they've been caught up by other issues of basic structure and many other questions in court. Where we are now, 2022, and the reason why there will be a crisis is because the next Parliament, the Chief Justice will still find it unconstitutional if it does not have the 2/3. And we don't know about that, President. This president did not dissolve parliament because there were court orders and stay. And we also don't know what would happen if the stay orders were removed. Yes. So we can't, there will be a very uncertain parliament. And you don't know if a parliament that is unconstitutional passes laws. We have now legal questions. Is the chicken and egg? Are those laws constitutional or not? We don't want to go into that crisis. That's why we're saying, let's talk among ourselves now, here, all of us as a country. Let's find the right solution that gives us the formula that will allow us to have 2/3. And one way, which is why I'm really in support of IBC, Chebukati has started the way, because one strategy for women is party tickets. So we give women party tickets. Senate is already very close to complying. Now with Senator Kavindu, recently with 4 senators and then the special seat. The Senate complies. County assemblies, no issue. Cabinet, a president can appoint 30%. This president has appointed 7 women. The next president can appoint the full, and that is a problem of mathematics. Because even they usually say 7 out of 22 is 1/3. No, as people it is 34%. But that is a question of mathematics. At least there is goodwill. Where now the problem is National Assembly. And what I'm hoping can happen with the National Assembly is either a bill comes now that compels or creates space, or the Supreme Court now finds a way of interpreting that, situation that we all are in a way that when we go to the election of 2022, the result and the outcome is going to be 2/3 compliant. So we start, all of us, by supporting Chebukati, because the party candidates list have not been drawn. Parties go out there and give women party tickets, and not just in non-winnable, positions, in strongholds. Rwanda, it is true, it is party lists, but Rwanda, it is also political will, it is resources spent on women to be elected. Rwanda is also running mate situation. So the presidential candidates can't run away from this, and I like what you are asking.
Yeah.
It is true that the choice of a presidential candidate is many things, including votes. But even women can be voting machines. Even women can have votes. Women can be from communities. Let the presidential candidates not dismiss women constituencies just for the fact that we don't have money and we don't have votes. And a woman can also have potential to get the money and to get the votes.
And as a commissioner in the Gender Commission, talking about equality and matters as well, would you then advise the president, has there been an effort to say, dissolve parliament, because up until when this is seen to be an important matter as to occasion crisis, which is part of what CJ Emeritus Maraga talked about as he proposed and asked that the president do so, advised that he dissolve parliament. Have you also taken a position to come out and say, Mr. President, you have to do this, you need to do this?
Yeah, that was indeed the position of the commission. Our commission is marking 10 years today. Having been established in 2011. And if there's something we have become associated with, this is the 2/3 gender role. And so when CJ Maraga gave that ruling, our commission had no choice. We say he followed the law. There were judgments and judgments and judgments about this implementation. There were bills and bills and bills. So we said that, but the matter is now in court. You would know that it went back to court. So we still expect the court to speak again on the advisory. But there are other strategies as well which we have not exhausted. In the last parliament, and Majority Leader would know, we had a special fund for women candidates on competitive seats, administered through the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. I think it is time to bring back such measures, to get a special fund that then allows women who are competing, for example, for Senate or gubernatorial or Member of Parliament, especially Member of Parliament where we have a crisis in the sense of the 2/3 gender rule, to then come in and the fund assists women candidates to be able to run and to be competitive. So there are still, if you ask, especially for those of us who are in the movement, we still have 1,001 strategies that we have not tried. We have not tried special funds. We have not tried party candidates lists. We have not tried, and the quota system that we have of 2/3 is an international standard. It is the women reps we have in Kenya are the district MPs in Uganda. And so some of these are also international best practices. And he accused us of going to CSW. Our men are also a bit unfair. The whole year they don't find time for 2/3 bill. Only until the CSW is going to be convened do they find time for the 2/3 bill. Okay. But it is very important to understand that these are international conversations as well. That gender equality is very much an international conversation. So when women parliamentarians in Kenya join with other women parliamentarians across the world and across Africa. It is to share strategies of what is working. We now have Suluhu, and that is why we're asking for a running mate. The reason why Suluhu has come is because she was a running mate to President Magufuli. So we want the same for Kenya. So this lesson sharing is not a bill.
And yeah, Madam Ireri, let me bring you in, because at the end of the day, you mentioned about how other countries and women being caregivers, and we've seen the countries led by women. There has been a sentiment out there that they've handled COVID rather well, whether you agree or not, but that has been the sentiment. However, in as far as women organizing, you remember when you saw Embrace, which was, I think, put together to push BBI, then you saw Inua Mama, which was to counter on the other side. Are women organizing? Because if you're the majority of the electorate, surely there should be a coming together of realizing we have these numbers, we can force a seat at the table and constructively engage, as opposed to being seen as flower girls. I hate to use it, but largely these men will go craft some deal, then see, okay, which one do we fix here? So we have a semblance of
just for optics.
Just for optic purposes. So I wonder if even as the women move, there's that strategic thinking from where you sit.
There is. Let me start with a point about COVID management. Actually, it was research that was done. I think it was global, where they put the numbers in countries such as New Zealand that have a female prime minister, and other Eastern Europe countries. And you actually saw that the strategies, the thinking, the numbers in terms of COVID were actually much better than other countries. So I mean, there are other varied reasons, but largely the fact that they had women leaders in office was seen as a driver. Why? Because women will look at very many things. Right now, and I'll belabor this point, it is really sad, and I'd like Kenyans to really analyze that the Minister for Health, the CS for Health, keeps on sending a warning shot to a particular class of the country, who are the political class, who seem to be spreading the COVID. But who are these people? They are men. I'm certain, I'm waiting to see someone point out to a female political leader who is really violating these particular rules. Why? Because women will put families at the heart of everything. And that's why we are pushing for her to have more women at the table, because we will make certain decisions that are good for the country. Now, back to your question, Sophia, about organizing. Women have been organizing. And I'll give the example of just last week, where FIDA Kenya and other institutions brought together women across the country from various political parties, from various political divides. We only had one political party, and that was women. We had women who had, we had intersectionality of young women, older women, women living with disability, minorities, and the rallying call was one, that we are ready, we have a constituent, we are going out to the various political outfits that will suit us best, but ultimately we are going to support each other. So I think in terms of organizing, and I can affirm with confidence that women have been organizing, and it's not just in political affairs. Look at the churches, look at the religious institutions, look at development. When you call for a meeting, Sophia, even at county level, the first people, I can assure you, who get to these meetings are women. And so it's very important that we now amplify this, because women have been seen to be such good organizers across the board. Politically, they're also doing that. Women have thought out their manifestos. They know who's going to lead their campaigns. They might struggle in terms of financing, but we've seen that's not an impediment. We can still support women. So women are organized, and they've proven that regardless of what it is that they face, they can come together. Yes, there was a time when we had, for example, the Embrace and the Inua Dadas, but Inua Mamas. Yes, but what we did, we found that at the end of the day, that regardless of having Inua Mama or Embrace, we were able to bring them together, even as institutions that are apolitical like FIDA, and say at the end of the day, our goal is to get more women, and on that we agree, and we're able to have a common agenda around it. So women have been organizing, and they will continue to organize, and so we are calling upon, at the end of the day, even for men do consider which is the best political outfit, and some are in one political party and the other political party. We never find anything odd with that.
And yes, I would say, for the record, not to say that if women are reading from different scripts, it is wrong, they're not organizing. It was just for
So women are out there, and we're actually encouraging them. And what is really exciting, and we saw that with Commissioner, is that we are having a record number of young women who have come out. And so we need to support these young women, the dreams that they have, because at the end of the day, the youth still constitute a huge population.
I know we need to listen to something from Mombasa, but just so I don't lose my trail of thought here. Yes. It would appear that political parties are the silver bullet ahead of 2022, that if we don't get it right at the political party level, then we might just lose it altogether. Then we are back to this conversation after 2022. Is this an engagement we are having with political parties? Because immediately after Chebukati spoke about this, we already saw a lot of negative sentiments from key political players in these political parties. So how do we intend to bridge this gap?
For us, two things stand out. One, what Commissioner Chairperson Chebukati has mentioned is actually the gold standard. That was the minimum that was required. And that is actually law, because he has done what the law mandates him to do. So where we now need to take the battle, and even as FID and other institutions will be bold about it, is to have probably a list of shame for political parties who will not have that. Yes, because I know this one will be no. Let me tell you something, Sophia. When women decide to blacklist you, women are powerful. And for us, it's a letdown, because the chairperson of the IBC has required this minimal requirement of US political parties. And what we want to see, and that's the discussion we had last week, is that if it's an Orange Democratic Party, have lists that are in your stronghold. Don't give us names of ladies in an area that you know definitely you'll not get, because that will just be an exercise to tick the box. Similar for the other parties such as UDA and Jubilee. And women are watching. And for us, the fact that you just can do that shows goodwill. The political goodwill that's required to show women that we consider you important, your parties, your members of this party. Let's not forget women contribute financially to these parties as well. They are members of these parties. So it's just as well that they are treated with that kind of respect, that they are equal members in these parties. They need to be given space, not only within the party leadership, but to vie fairly. And where there are disputes, we do want to see fair processes that women can actually have outcomes they are happy with, because they were fair and just in terms of internal processes. So we need to walk the talk. I think let's not start, and I know there's been that talk that perhaps it's unattainable. It is attainable. We have seen things can happen in this country, but sadly when it comes to the gender question, we start now creating the issues of impossibility. But it is possible. If there is goodwill, it is possible.
It's a goodwill question.
Honorable Duale, we are nearing the end of this discussion. And it's interesting how you have said, I think when I put the question of perhaps the likes of the DP considering, and it's just part of that goodwill, have a running mate who's a woman, not because it automatically sorts out all of the issues, but I think as we bring this to a close, as we wrap up, is to hear for you realistically how we begin to gain and make strides, significant ones at that. Because at the end of the day, you talked about progressive. I mentioned to you the data shows that we've flip-flopped, we are doing well, we've dipped now. But still, you have a significant number of your population not part of the decision-making, not seated at the table. And that should worry us all, that in essence, there's that disproportionate representation. So from where you sit, how this ought to move forward, finally?
No, I think in terms of leadership and also in the three arms of government, you need to read Article 1 of the Constitution. I mean, the people of Kenya, either through the legislature, the judiciary, and the national government, delegates power to other Kenyans, and it doesn't say. But I think, let me make this very, very clear, because I don't want to lie. I can say without fear of any contradiction that there's no law available for Chebukati to enforce the two-third gender principle. And my good sister Nyokabi knows, she's a lawyer, that even Article 27 and Article 81 and Article 100, within the Constitution, it says Parliament must legislate. So in the absence of that legislation, you cannot force that. So Chebukati, what he just said in Mombasa is hogwash. Two, and more fundamental, the principle of the two-thirds gender is an obligation upon the state. And when we say the state, is the three arms of government. I mean, you know, there are many, many other issues that the people of Kenya must deal with. But you have asked a very good question, which this panel, and which is also not two-thirds gender compliance, you know, tonight. You have asked them, the women of Kenya are majority voters. Why are they not electing women? The simple reason is, and my sisters, both of them who are with you, they know it. This discussion of the two-thirds gender, making more women to sit at the table for the good of our country, is just within the boardrooms and workshops and retreats in Nairobi. The women in the rural areas in Kenya have not bought that idea. They have not been sold the pros and the cons of electing women. So there's a lot of work even to be done by organizations like FIDA, by women leaders. And I can tell you, even as an experience in the office of the leader of majority for 7.5 years, the women themselves in parliament, those who are from the single constituency members of parliament, were telling other women, no, you have to vie, you have to compete. So I think as a country, let us not cheat ourselves. The obligation of the implementation of the two-thirds gender is an obligation on a particular parliament, the 11th parliament, the 12th parliament, the 13th parliament. The Chief Justice will only give another advisory opinion for the dissolution of parliament if maybe the first 2 years of the 13th parliament they will not implement. But I am sure Kenyans going forward to the 2022 general election, they will elect more women. I am very optimistic, and I think Honorable Nyakabi should not develop a very hard stand. You must be very flexible. You must allow a progressive way. If you don't want that, I have given you an option. Go and talk to the president. In fact, you are more of a political activist than a commissioner with a gender. I mean, you are in BBI. Go tell the president and the former prime minister, please use the force you have used on BBI on this. And finally, before I leave, I want to say this very clearly, and both ladies are lawyers. The basic structure, doctrine, covers the functions of parliament, the legislature, covers the judiciary, the executive, and the Bill of Rights. They were very categorical. The judges were very categorical. So now the story has shifted to a referendum. I don't think, and I'm going to ask the Speaker for direction on any bill that wants to amend the Constitution to implement the two-thirds gender. What is the interpretation of the basic structure doctrine as given by the High Court and upheld by the Court of Appeal? So the matter is not that generic, that easy, the way many people want to think. But from where I sit, I think we have more serious national crisis. We have the COVID, we have the debt, we have a general election that we want to have and pray that it will be free, fair, and peaceful.
Thank you.
So I think the remaining 1 year, let us focus on the most urgent national issues. We go to the 13th Parliament, we look at the numbers,
Okay.
And see if the 13th Parliament can do its obligation. I don't think the 12th Parliament has any time left to deal with any bill concerning the two-thirds gender principle. That's my take.
It's mentioned you extensively, so perhaps I think we should give you a right to respond to the things you said.
I'm actually
as
very
you give us your
sad myself.
closing remarks.
Yeah, sure. It's a lot of sadness because Honorable Duale has actually been one of the leaders who we have relied on the 2000s, and I think clearly we've lost him. I think that we've lost him in this conversation. He doesn't think the matter is priority. He doesn't want to encourage his own party, the UDA, to support women. He doesn't want his own party to do a two-thirds party candidates list. I think that that's a really, really sad day for the women of Kenya to lose a leader like Duale on this conversation. I think that's really, really sad. But I think that we can't give up. Luckily for women, we've been here before. It has never been easy. The two-thirds principle did not even get into the Constitution easily. In BBI, it was not easy. It has not been easy anywhere. I don't think it will be easy for the 2022 election. And I think what it tells us is that we have to put on our, sort of boxing gloves. And we're going to wear boxing gloves. This one, we are taking no prisoners. The election will have to produce a two-thirds list. We must find a solution. And there will be a solution in law. Okay. Even if, say, the law is not clear on the two-thirds party candidates list, a good leader would say, maybe the law is not as clear, but my party will give a two-thirds list.
The goodwill
we keep talking about. And that's what we are expecting of leaders. And he's using 1,001 reasons as to why we can't get the two-thirds. Let me tell you, my only feeling is that we put on our shoes is like another wave of COVID. We've done first wave, it did not succeed. Second wave, the BBI has not succeeded, but that is no reason for us to hang our boots. We energize, and that's the conversation we had with the voter data. We energize ourselves, we prepare ourselves, we get leaders of goodwill. I hope that Duale, when he sleeps, when he wakes up tomorrow, he will be he will go back to the days of his being majority leader, support his own party to enforce the two-thirds, encourage other men to support the two-thirds. In BBI, and I just want to single out Honorable Junet. In BBI, he was even nicknamed Kewopa Chair, Vice Chair. Kewopa Chair is me and the Vice Chair, because he was very, very supportive. And so routinely, and we cannot underscore the role of male allies. This is a societal problem, but let's not shy away from solving it. Just as gender equality is an urgent matter, COVID is urgent, and you are never going to have a society that moves forward where only one gender is solving the problems. Both genders must really come to the table.
Okay.
So, you have to call us again. You called us too early before we finished reading the judgment and find solutions. We are talking among ourselves. We are talking to the Minister of Gender. Just today, NGC was marking 10 years. We are looking at our journey. In the next week or so, we will be back to the trenches, whether by a bill or by a court order.
You're going to have the last word on this. Where do we go from here?
I think for Kenyans is to encourage them. Think of your mom, think of your grandma, think of your sister, think of your wife. She makes certain decisions that you're happy about. Wouldn't it be nice to have many more women in decision making across the board? So this discussion is not up there. It's about your daily life. It's about everything you consume to your house. It's about the safety of your daughter. It's about the life you want to lead. So we are calling upon Kenyans to give women a chance because they have proven they have done it. They're not asking for freebies. Women have been making decisions. They just want a national platform to make this decision. And to the women aspirants across the country, please don't lose hope. Continue preparing, have your campaign manifestos ready, have your campaign teams ready. The Constitution has promised us that we'll get two-thirds, at least in terms of, not more than two-thirds in terms of leadership. As institutions such as FIDE and NGEC and others, we shall actualize that, whatever it takes, because we as Kenyans must walk the talk. We have done that with other provisions in the Constitution. The gender provision or the gender clause will not be an exception in terms of our commitment. Thank you.
All right, and we wish you the very best. For us, we'll continue to...
The fight has just been declared.
Thank you very much, Honorable Priscilla Nyokabi, Gender and Equality Commissioner there, and Ireri, who's Executive Director at FIDA, Aidan Duale, who was a pioneer majority leader, Garissa Township Member of Parliament as well, for being part of this discussion tonight. And of course, you for watching. Has always been a pleasure to have your company with us. On behalf of the entire team, all the way from 6 and now, that has made Kivumbi 2022 possible, we are delighted that you could make time for this show. From Akisa and myself, have a good night. We'll see you next week.